the music or keep it going?
I mean, we can set a vibe for a moment with the music.
Okay. Maybe
Done.
I'll do my little introduction here. So, hey, everybody, thanks for joining. I am super excited to have Gabrielle Blackwell, or GB, on with my vision selling interview. And it's funny, like the vision selling came about from our time at Arise, talking about the purpose of a vision is not so that you achieve it, but it's who it makes you today. So I wanted to bring on the best sales leaders that I know, so that we can kind of take little nuggets from them and ultimately live out those characteristics today in ourselves and how we progress our careers. So GB, thank you so much for being on here.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
Yeah. And for everyone, for just to understand GB's background, big standout at Gong and Airtable and Culture Amp as a sales development leader, most recently at Culture Amp here. And she's doing some really cool things as a content creator that we'll definitely dive into. GB, I'd love to hear your story on your career and kind of why you chose sales, and maybe we just dive into it.
Yeah, so I will tell two stories, and
Cool.
they're both true at the same time. So there's the story of like desperation, where I was like, I need a job. I'm living in my uncle's basement. I've got like negative 427 euros in my bank account because I was moving over from France back to the States, and I was like, I need somebody to hire me, and then you know, had found a manager who was a buffoon enough to bring me on, right? So that's like the first story that I tell people kind of in a joking way. But really what was going on with me was when I was moving back from Paris, I was thinking that I was going to go into like an HR or people related role. Was going through the interviews and I could like never get past the phone screen. And so after about 20 some interviews in a matter of 2 weeks, I was like, dang, I'm going about this the wrong way. I'm just looking for a job when really I need to think about building a career. And so when I thought about where I wanted my career to take me, I was like, I'm way too nosy and way too curious, and I want to be involved in everything. And so I think a CEO is going to be the spot for me. And like, where do CEOs start their careers? And I had whittled it down to sales and finance. And I'm like, I mean, I can talk to strangers. So I guess sales it is.
Yeah.
So I made that decision. Let's say on a Tuesday, I was like, I'm getting into sales. On a Wednesday, I applied for an SDR role, and the following Wednesday was my first day. So that was really the story of how I got into sales.
That's awesome. I love that. And coming back from France, I understand why you would want to be in HR because you like are the ultimate people person, but I'm glad you chose the dark side and have grown in the ranks there. That's cool.
The dark side chose me. Okay.
Yeah. Cool. Well, like let's think about our audience here. Our audience are typically maybe junior sellers, maybe someone that is interested in software sales, but they don't know kind of the path, the like cookie cutter path. They might go from SDR to inside sales to field to sales director to chief revenue officer, but like it's not always that case. There's other opportunities out there. And SDR management could be one, or moving into marketing could be one. So let's say like you have a ton of experience as a sales development leader. What could someone do in preparation to like set themselves up for success there or transition to a role like that?
Yeah. So I think regardless of where you want to take your career, so let's say that you are an SDR, or let's say that you're someone who is, I like to just call them like early in career. So whether you're an SDR or you're an AE, but you're early on. I think the most important thing that you can do is perform in your role. Like that's hopefully a given. But I think you want to make sure that you are performing in your role. The next thing, and all of this doesn't have to happen like one at a time. It can all happen all at the same time. But it's finding your mentors, both internally and externally, finding your coaches, like really building out your support system, prioritizing learning and development. So like making sure that you are building up your business acumen, if you want to move from an SDR role into a role where you're going to be demoing the product, you're building up your product acumen, you're building up your discovery acumen. Like, you're looking for ways to get better, not just at the role that you're in, but in the roles that you want to get into as well. And I think another big piece of this is like, you have to raise your internal brand and your visibility.
Mm,
If promotion, like, yes, your quota, the only thing that is a true meritocracy, in my opinion, when it comes to sales, is that your variable is influenced by your performance. That's the only part of a sales career that is a true meritocracy. Promotions do not follow in the rules of meritocracy. They do not, right? It is a full on political campaign. And usually it's the people who are known, who are liked, right? Who other people are invested in, who end
mm,
up getting those promotions. So if you are performing alone, but nobody knows you at all, you're likely not going to get promoted in the same way that somebody else is performing, but has really started to cultivate those relationships with hiring managers, with people who will be their teammates on the next team, right? Who have internally built a brand of being a top performer. So I think there's like the cookie cutter things, such as, yes, you perform, right? Like, you're on your manager's good side, but it really is that next part of, you need to play the field and really kind of run your promotion cycle, or your opportunity to be promoted, like a political campaign.
yeah. Yeah. I love the part that you're talking about building a brand. I remember my very first job, my dad actually talked to me about building a brand, and then it was like hammered into me at Oracle.
Yeah.
But like, I remember he was like, no matter what happens, just never talk bad about somebody, because that's always like, you don't want that brand of someone that's talking bad about anybody. Right.
Yeah.
So I thought that was a good one. I'm curious, when you talk about building a brand, what's a good example of something someone could do to stand out? Like you mentioned, look, like trying to get internal and external mentors, but like, what are some other things that you're like, wow, this person's on the right track?
Yeah, I'm thinking about like the coaching that I'm giving to my reps right now. So these are folks who are outbound SDRs, and they will likely be eligible for promotion in the next like 1 to, let's say, 5 months. And so with them, the things that I'm really talking about are, all right, there's the work that you're doing within the role, there's the work that you're doing within our team. Our team knows that. I know that. Who else knows that?
Mm,
Go, right? So, like, so using Culture Amp, there is a way for reps to go and ask other people to provide them feedback, and it lives within the platform, and everybody in leadership can see that. So if you have opportunities to like ask people essentially for recommendations, like, so you're building out your kind of your portfolio of recommendations and positive feedback, like, that's one thing, that's one asset that you can have. I'd also look at, what are opportunities that you have that will support your growth, like your in-seat growth or your like next role growth? And what are opportunities that you have to support other people, other teams, let's say, and it aligns? So maybe like, so let's say one of my reps is really interested in going into being an account executive as a next step after an SDR. And one of the things that they really want to do is get more face time and learn how to demo. Maybe what they'll do in return is say, hey, like, I'm really good at outbound prospecting. I know the AEs on this team are not quite there. There's a lot of opportunities to improve. And so what I really want to be able to do is like socialize what is working. Right? I'm like, cool, go talk to the AE manager and see if that's something that you can lead during one of their team meetings. And like, that is something that's happened, right? So then what's up happening is the rep gets the visibility from their new potential hiring manager. They got a whole team of AEs who are now like, oh my gosh, look at what this person has done. And now I'm way better at my job. Two, they're putting that into like a feedback recognition system or giving you shout outs in Slack. And all of a sudden it's like, oh wow, like, what is Zach doing? Like, that was
yeah.
really cool. Can Zach present at my team as well?
Yeah.
Right. And so then so then what's up happening is, over time, people will go, all right, Zach is the person I want to reach out to about this. Zach shows a lot of promise and a lot of potential. I think I'm curious about what it would be like to have Zach on my team. And then when they're thinking about who they're going to hire next, someone in that room will probably say, hey, like, what's going on with Zach? Do you think this is a role that'd be interesting for him?
Mm.
Right. And the same
Like
thing
you're
for,
building a good culture.
Yeah, and the same thing for when working with a mentor as well. Like when you're thinking about where do you want to go next, it's similar to like, all right, if you're selling something, it's probably not going to be one person making a decision. A lot of these decisions are made in committees. So it's like, who is the like, what is the committee? The committee, and who do you actually need to engage with? And do they know who you are? And do they have a positive perception of you? Right? Like, how are you managing that? The stakeholder management part of this. Because again, also like how you run an interview cycle, how you build up your brand is probably going to be very, very close to how you would manage a deal cycle or a renewals process. So this is your time to really start to demonstrate your abilities and your expertise way before you've ever got the title that you want.
Hmm. I love your leadership style, because being an SDR leader, you know that your time is limited with them, because it is a development role, right? So there's one of many future lines of business that they could work on. So it's very cool, your mindset of how can I help you develop for that next role, which I really appreciate.
Yep.
For a lot of SDRs, there's a challenge because all they think about is their very current role is building pipeline, but
Mm,
then they just kind of hand it off to the AEs, and then they miss out on the development part, like developing their, okay, I want to see the demo, I want to see the negotiation, I want to see how you build the proposal, all of that kind of stuff. So
yep.
I love that you're like crossing your team into that next experience and getting them that just like seeing what a day in the life is like, because
Yeah.
it's tough to move from a pipeline generating role into a closing role in that example that you gave. But if you're watching over the shoulder of someone that's a badass,
Yeah.
it's definitely going to help. So that's great.
Yeah. I will add it's all in due time. So I think there's something that's really important for anyone who is occupying a sales development representative or BDR, whatever you want to call them, seat, is like you are hired to do the SDR role. So like sometimes I see people are really, really like anxious to get
Oh yeah.
out of it. And it's like, hey, listen, there's yes, it is a development thing, but I think it's also, this is not the best analogy, but to me, it's a little bit like it's like training camp, right? Which is there are certain things that people want to see. They want to see that you're consistent. They want to see that you're disciplined. They want to see that you're motivated. And this is your time, really, like the SDRC is really the time where people are really starting to get a feel for who are you as a professional,
Yeah.
right? And so if you are showing up as if you show up as someone who isn't putting in a consistent effort, right? Or if you haven't built that as an SDR, when you get to the next role, you're going to struggle mightily,
Yeah.
right? Because it's like all the things you can get away with in the SDR world, like that will start, you'll be, there'll be a lot more exposure, a lot more cracks in the system when you get to that AE. And there's also like a pretty large failure rate from SDR to AE. And I think some of that is because people are in such a rush to move to the next thing versus like, oh, like what are the skill sets that I can learn and master so that when I do move, I have a much higher chance of being successful in that next role. Like it's not enough
Yeah.
to get promoted. It's not enough just to get hired, right? Like the win comes when you are experiencing success in that role.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I see I mentor a ton of SDRs, and I see about 9.5, 10 months, they start getting really antsy to get into that next role. I think the worst thing someone can do is move from a current company laterally to another SDR role elsewhere, because they're going to want you to have that year elsewhere. So,
Yeah.
but I want to echo what you what you said on, there's a lot of visibility once you move into that closing role. So I would take the full at least 12 months, but I'm building my relationships with and strategically getting mentors that are hiring managers. That way, that's what I did in order to land the gig that I want. Sure, hitting your quota numbers and all of the KPIs, that's table stakes. Like you
Yeah.
have to do that. But doing the things outside of hours, like reading business books, business acumen is a very difficult skill set to build when you're right out of college or whatever it might be. So like going and finding mentors, reading business books, listening to the best reps on drive time is what we called it.
Yep.
But yeah, I think those are all big things. And I would encourage SDRs not to get too antsy, because you can only have that one first impression to
Mm,
start as a sales rep and be like, oh, I hit quota every quarter. It wasn't like a 9-month wait. for you to actually produce. So, no, I love what you said there. There's a lot of SDRs. Maybe this is their first sales role. Maybe they have 1 year experience. What's a interview that stands out to you that was like, oh, these guys, this quality of this person really stood out, or I can tell you're really going to be good at this type of role?
Ooh. I don't know. I don't know how to answer that specific question, but I can give you a response. And I think
Okay.
there's certain things that I look for when thinking about who I want to hire. And not just like, oh, like I think they would be good, but like, ooh, this person is really strong and I will advocate big time to have them on my I will fight another manager to have them on my team, right? Like that's like, like I'm really excited about them. And I think that there is like this comes down to I'm going to say three things. There's your resume, there are your characteristics, um and then there's how you manage your interview process as well. So when I think
Mm.
about your resume, the first thing that I'm looking at is, and this aligns as well as to your characteristics. So I'm going to start with characteristics. The things that I'm really looking for characteristic wise is drive. And so let's say there are three key components to drive. It is this person has a track record, like they need to achieve, like they need to attain and they need to attain highly, and they have a track record behind that. This is somebody who takes thrill in competition. They're not cutthroat, right? And then the third piece is that they're optimistic about their abilities. And so that might manifest itself as like a growth mindset, let's say. And so there are things that so the first thing that I want to look at is this somebody who demonstrates those characteristics and those qualities? The most like your resume is the first thing that I'm going to look at to see, do you have this? So for really what I'm looking for are, do you have a track record of achievement, whether it's professionally, academically, athletically, or maybe it has to do with work that you've done in your community or certain kind of organizations that you've been a part of. So like that's the first, so, like those are things that you want to highlight in your resume. Because I'm also like, can this person tell a compelling story as well that resonates with me? That's another quality that we need to be hiring for, and that it's going to be an important skill set when you get into the role. So like, and I'm also going to continue to validate that throughout the interview process. And so when I'm asking someone, let's say like, hey, I might ask them a set of questions that will highlight or not this person's level of like need to achieve or to attain highly. So I'm like, all right, cool. Tell me about a time where you achieved something really greatly. What was a big motivator for you? What really drove you? What compelled you to do that? And someone will say, oh, it was really important to me because of X, Y, and Z. Right? I'm like, cool, that's a motivator for you. Give me another story that highlights how X, Y, and Z is a motivator for you. Right? This is when we're getting like, is this a characteristic? Can I count on you? Are you consistent in how you show up in that way? Right? And then I'll also ask them for a third example. I got all this from Kevin Dorsey. And so, because really, like when I'm bringing somebody on, the worst experience for a rep as well as for a manager is where I am managing this person's motivation on a day-to-day basis. Like, do you actually want to be here? Is this something that you actually want to do?
Yeah.
Right? If we're constantly having that conversation, we're not talking about performance. We're not talking about promotion either. We're trying to figure out, do you belong here? Very honestly. And that's not a fun place to be. And then I think the third thing that I said was like, how are you managing the interview process? So this is everything from, again, like, do you have a well-tailored resume, right? That is tailored for this role specifically. Are you coming in and are you asking questions that demonstrate that you've done research, right? So I've had people who've come in and asked me, who do you sell to? And what does the company do? I'm like, oh my God, get me off the phone right now. Then I think there are certain things, or even questions like, hey, like what do you think makes a good SDR and a not great SDR? I'm like, these are all things that you can find online, very
Yeah.
honestly, right? So I'm also looking at like, what is the quality of their questions? Are they showing that they've done the research? Are they asking about like, are they asking challenging questions in the sense of, hey, like what does your onboarding look like? And tell me like, how do you approach reps that are struggling, or how would you handle these kinds of situations? I'm like, this is somebody who might be thinking really like deeply and critically about this opportunity, and they want to make sure they're making the right choice. So there's like those kinds of examples. They're sending thank you notes afterwards. There's finding
Bingo.
ways of standing out. Like there are people who are literally like reaching out to other SDRs and other AEs at the company and asking them like, what is your experience like, and who's doing really well. Like they're showing that they're really invested, and then they're bringing that information back to me. I'm like, I would love to see how they prospect to our customers,
Yeah.
right? So I think there are these people who they're already showing that they can do the work, right? And then I'm curious about what it'd be like at our company. They also have that track record of showing, like, demonstrating the characteristics that I'm looking for.
Bingo.
And then they've presented themselves very, very well, right? In all these other assets too. And it's consistent across the board. Because if you show up really great with me, but then you show up like an asshole to the next person, I'm going to go like, who is this person?
Yeah.
So I think those are the really big things to focus on and be really like on top of if you're, I mean, if you're going for any role, but especially if you're like, I want to work with GB or someone like her, like you have to
Yeah.
go above and beyond.
Yeah, yeah, it's so funny. I had a mentor reach out to me, and she was like, "Oh, hey, how are you doing?" She goes, "Hey, not gonna lie, the reason why I'm texting you is I know you're connected in Austin. I have this person. He just finished his MBA. He wants to become an SDR. So he ends up reaching out to me. I have an hour call with him. I'm helping him get the lay of the land, who to interview with. And he goes, "Man, I'm just so scared. I've never done anything in sales." I was like, well, dude, you just landed a meeting with me through
Yeah,
an introduction,
yeah,
and now you're going to take this and the stuff that I coached you, and you're going to go reach out to these people and do video intros. And he's like, you know what? This is sales. I was like, this is prospecting.
this is it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you are doing the job right now.
yes.
Now you just got to hawk somebody else's technology.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Like, so I could tell in some of your answers, like you always have these like highly personable management style. You're real high EQ leadership, some people might say. How'd you develop yourself in such a way? Like, I know the obvious answer is like, hey, I'm just me, but like,
Yeah.
how else could someone like move in this direction of more like high EQ leadership?
I I think I was really like I'm very fortunate in that I like my grandfather. He was at IBM for 20 years and moved from being like a systems engineer to going into sales and then moving his way up to being a branch manager. At one point in time, I think was one of the highest ranking African Americans at IBM globally. So, and why I say this is there are so many times where I'm just out and about, and he also had his own company too, right? Where he had like 300 people at his company. So why I say this is I would walk around Chicago, where I'm from. I'm from the suburbs, but I'd walk around and someone would, like, I might say, hey, my name's Gabrielle Blackwell. And they would go, Blackwell, do you know Bob Blackwell? My grandfather. I'm like, yes, I do. It's my grandfather. And they'd say, he mentored me. He led me. He was my manager. He was my second level leader. And they spoke about him in such admiration. And so I also like grew up seeing him in action at the office. So I think just growing up, I saw like I was like, wow, this is I love my poppy. Everybody seems to love him too. He's had a really great impact on these people. And so he would just teach me leadership lessons. And
Hmm.
a lot of what he taught me was like you have to take your people's success personally. Like you have to be personally invested in the people who are on your team. Like it's not by chance, it's not some weird cosmic thing, like it's not transactional whatsoever. And so like you have to take that with a great deal of responsibility and a lot of duty in that, but it's also like such a privilege that you're in this position. So I think I had that kind of I had that kind of leadership model for me. I had a really great manager my first time in sales as an like first time SDR. And so I really thought about like, and I was getting like 200% of my number. Right. So I'm like, all right, well, how did he show up for me that helped me perform at such a high
Hmm.
rate and to be inspired and encouraged to even surpass all of that too. So I thought about that as well. But then over time, I think I also got really comfortable in what I like, just who I am as a person and what I could offer and like my own strengths. So I had a mentor, John Gilman, and one of the things that he he encouraged me to do. He's like, "Hey, listen, you seem like a really cool, kind of out there person. Uh, I'd love to be on your team because I'd be like, who is this personality? And like, this is so awesome." So he really encouraged me to bring more of myself into my work. And so I just realized that the more that I was comfortable with myself, the more comfortable I was sharing with my people, the more I could show up for them, the more I could show I was invested and I can care about them. Like the more I saw that they cared that I cared, right? And they're like, "I don't
Mm.
wanna let you down." And, like,
Yeah.
that's what it was for me with my first manager. I was like, "Hey, like, I really care about this, and, like, you took a shot on me, and I don't want you to ever question the decision that you made to bring me on board."
I love that swagger. That's
Yeah,
amazing.
yeah.
Well, GB, I'd love to like have a chance for you to plug your newsletter one-on-one. I'm a subscriber. I love the little leadership nuggets that I get all the time. But
Nice.
how do people follow you? How do they get to gain some of these wisdom from you
Yes.
moving
Alright.
forward?
Go follow me on LinkedIn, and then on my page, it says, like, you can subscribe to the one-on-one. So it's a weekly newsletter that I send out every Thursday. Goes at 11:30 AM Central Time. It is my labor of love, and I think it's always good, right? Other people might have other opinions, but I'm just like, I've got, like, 5 years worth of management experience. I've seen a lot of, like, good stuff. I've seen a lot of not good stuff. I've studied up a lot. I've got a lot of really great mentors. And so it really is a culmination of experience, the gifts of mentorship, and a desire to just want to leave sales a much better place than I think a lot of people are finding it right now.
That's amazing. Well, I'm super happy that I met you, and I'm happy that you're in Austin, Texas. I feel like there's this little like sales influencer group that I'm trying to like break into, but it's cool that I'm like making friends along the way, which is the main part. And
Yes.
I definitely consider you one of those. So I really appreciate you coming on here and sharing your vision for the rest of the audience, and I just really appreciate it.
Thank you, Zach. Appreciate you.
Alrighty. Well, that's it for today. Let's please subscribe for more vision selling interviews so you can hear from more badasses like GB. Thanks.
Boom.